Becoming disabled by choice, not chance. Transabled people feel like imposters in their fully working bodies. Oh joy. Let's take this step by step. Immediately there is a video. In it, Clive Baldwin, Canada Research Chair in Narrative Studies, says, "At present, for a number, amputation is the only way forward. Most people would rather not have these feelings, but they do, and they won't go away. Society needs to appreciate that. However strange it sounds, it isn't beyond the pale to allow people to align their body with how they feel they ought to." That's a nice bit of storytelling, isn't it? For some people, the only way forward is to cut limbs off, and so, society needs to appreciate that. Seems very reasonable if you presume that's just the way it is. Let's look at what this guy's been studying. Essentially, as far as I can tell, he sort of specializes in the way that people get around not having facts on their side by using narrative and rhetoric. On that note, remind me, what was his evidence that for some people, the only way forward is to amputate limbs? Based on this paper's abstract, it looks like he's looking at how it can be used for bad, constructing the narrative that someone's an abuser when they're not. It would be very interesting if he thinks these methods could be used for good. Apparently he does. There's even a narrative, human rights and social justice section. Unfortunately, the preview I found does not include this section, and I don't want to fork out for this guy's book. This might be something worth looking into for someone else, but I'm gonna go back to the meat of this news article. The article begins by telling us a bit about One Hand Jason, a man who mutilated himself because he felt like his hand wasn't his own. This is absolutely horrendous, and I wish he had gotten some help. This sort of situation I could possibly understand cutting off someone's limb if there was no way to stop them from doing it to themselves. That way, at least the procedure would be safer. However, I remain unconvinced that there is no alternative whatsoever. What really stands out to me is how the sources in this article are trying to categorize this. Some of his study participants do draw parallels to the experience many transgender people express of not feeling like they're in the right body. Baldwin says this disorder is starting to be thought of as a neurological problem with the body's mapping, rather than a mental illness. Thought of like that by who? I think that's quite important. Is it thought of like that by, say, neuroscientists? In any case, he's presented it as some kind of consensus, which is interesting because one of his papers writes about how presenting a consensus can be useful when your narrative is not underpinned by facts. It's a problem for individuals because it's distressing, but lots of things are. He suggests this is just another form of body diversity, like transgenderism, and amputation may help someone achieve similar goals as someone who, say, undergoes cosmetic surgery to look more like who they believe their ideal selves to be. Except, may I note, that you will not have a fucking arm anymore. As the public begins to embrace people who identify as transgender, the trans people within the disability movement are also seeking their due, or at very least a bit of understanding in a public that cannot fathom why anyone would want to be anything other than healthy and mobile. How very close-minded of them. But this has been met with great resistance in both the disability activist community and in transgender circles, argues Burrell, a visiting scholar of feminist gender and sexuality studies at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. They tend to see transabled people as dishonest people who try to steal resources from the community, people who would be disrespectful by denying or fetishizing or romanticizing disability reality, Burrell says. Adding people in both transgender and disabled circles tend to make judgmental or prejudicial statements about transabled people. Check your cripple privilege. Transability is also known as body integrity identity disorder, but I guess calling something that makes you want to cut off essential parts of your body a disorder is too negative for people these days. There is a lot of fiddling around and switching of positions here. Yes, a condition that makes you feel like part of your body is not your own and that you want to cut it off is a horrible thing to be afflicted with. However, the response to this condition existing being a push for mass public acceptance of cosmetic amputation of limbs is insane. But, as usual, that's just another one of my harmful opinions.